Silence is not what you think it is. It is not an absence. It is not a void. It is in fact the loudest and most terrifying sound an emotionally avoidant person will ever hear. And when you, a person who has loved with explanation, with reason, with a heart trying to bridge an impossible gap, finally choose it, when you stop translating your own soul into a language they refuse to understand, you will set in motion a psychological sequence they are utterly unprepared to face. This is not about playing a game. This is about a fundamental law of human connection. The one who needs words to feel seen is always at the mercy of the one who finds safety in silence, until they are not. You know the texture of this confusion. It feels like loving a ghost. One moment there is a warmth, a glimpse of a person present in the room with you. The next you are speaking to a retreating shadow. Your sentence is hanging in the air, dissolving into the void of their emotional withdrawal. You replay conversations, not for the joy of them, but for forensic analysis. What did I say? What did I do? How can I phrase this differently so it finally lands? You become a cartographer of a shifting landscape, constantly redrawing a map to a homeland that keeps moving its borders. Your intelligence, your empathy, your capacity for nuance, these become your greatest curses, because you use them to weave explanations, to build logical bridges over their emotional chasms. And each time you watch those bridges collapse under the weight of their silence, you are not crazy. You are not too much. You are in a dialogue with someone who left the conversation a long time ago but forgot to hang up the phone. So let's look calmly at what is happening on the other side of that distance. This is not malice. It is biology meeting biography. Their nervous system is not wired for connection. It is wired for threat detection. Your need for clarity, for reassurance, for simple emotional reciprocation registers not as love, but as a demand, as a prelude to engulfment. Their independence is not strength, it is a panic room. They suppress emotion not because they feel nothing, but because feeling anything, especially dependence, feels like a catastrophic loss of control. The distance they create, that is their control. It is the lever they pull to regulate their own internal turmoil. By being vague, by being non-committal, by withholding, they hold the emotional thermostat of the relationship. They make you responsible for their discomfort, and then they withdraw from the very responsibility they assigned. It is a perfect, airtight system until you change the air. The moment you stop chasing, not with drama, not with an ultimatum, but with a calm, decisive retreat into your own dignity, the entire system shorts out. Your silence is the one variable their blueprint cannot account for. They engineered everything around your reaction. Your explanations were their confirmation that they still mattered, that the emotional field revolved around their axis. Your calm silence removes that confirmation. It does not punish, it simply observes. And in that observation, they experience a profound loss of emotional control. The internal conflict they have spent a lifetime outsourcing suddenly has nowhere to go. The narrative flips. It is no longer about what you are doing wrong to cause their withdrawal. It becomes about what their withdrawal is causing, your absence. And for an avoidant, the fear of abandonment is just as potent as the fear of engulfment. It has just been buried deeper. You have not started a war. You have simply turned off the background noise they used to navigate. Now they are left alone with the sound of their own isolation. This is the authentic power shift, and it has nothing to do with revenge or winning. It is the power of reclamation. When you stop over-explaining, you stop outsourcing your reality. You stop asking them to validate your right to feel what you feel. Your silence becomes the container for your own clarity. You are no longer losing energy in the exhausting cycle of translate, chase, plead. That energy, that magnificent intellectual and emotional energy, compounds within you. It is no longer spent on diagnosing their disorder. It is invested in your own function. They will sense this. They will sense the gravitational pull of your newfound center. Your peace becomes the mirror that reflects their cha. Os, not the sponge that absorbs it. You stop losing when you stop explaining, because you are no longer playing a game where the only way to score is to justify your own existence on the field. What you are reclaiming is your native language. You are returning to the emotional dialect you spoke before you learned to contort yourself into their cryptic code. This is detachment, not abandonment. Detachment is a conscious, gentle uncoupling from the outcome of their behavior. It is grounding yourself in your own worth, regardless of their ability to see it. You are not becoming cold. You are becoming solid. Where there was chaotic reaction, there is now measured response. Where there was pleading, there is presence. Your strength is no longer expressed in the volume of your words, but in the depth of your calm. You are no longer a participant in the emotional starvation diet. You have sat down at your own table and begun to nourish yourself. So let this be your steady ground. The journey from confusion to clarity is not marked by their acknowledgement. It is marked by your quiet recognition that you have explained enough. To a person who chooses misunderstanding, no explanation will ever suffice. And to the person who finally chooses herself, no explanation is ever required. The most powerful truth you will ever hold is this: in the silence you once feared, you will finally hear the sound of your own voice, clear, unedited, and wholly your own. And that is a sound no distance see and touch. We misunderstand silence. We frame it as emptiness, a void where communication has died. In the context of a relationship strained by avoidant attachment, this interpretation is not only incorrect, it is the very misconception that fuels the cycle of pursuit and withdrawal. For the person seeking connection, silence feels like failure. It feels like the final, devastating proof that their words, their feelings, their very essence were not enough to bridge the gap. So they redouble their efforts. They explain more, they clarify, they plead, they offer new angles, softer tones, more logical frameworks. Each word is a stone thrown into a well, and they are listening desperately for the splash that never comes. What they are missing is that for the avoidant partner, that silence from them is not a void they've created. It is a mirror suddenly held up, and the reflection is one they've spent a lifetime fleeing. The avoidant nervous system is configured around a core, often unconscious, belief dependence is danger. Closeness is a prelude to engulfment. The predictability and warmth another person seeks are, to their internal radar, signals of an impending loss of autonomy. Your words, no matter how gently packaged, are registered as demands. Your need for clarity is experienced as pressure. Your reasonable request for emotional reciprocity feels like a cage being constructed around them. Their primary defense against this perceived threat is control through distancing. By being vague, by withholding affirmation, by emotionally retreating, they regulate the thermostat of intimacy. They keep it in a tolerable, if frigid, zone. Your explanations are, in this dysfunctional dance, a predictable part of their ecosystem. Your chasing confirms a critical unspoken rule that you are the one responsible for managing the emotional climate of the relationship. Your anxiety is the counterweight to their withdrawal. It provides a strange inverted stability. It tells them the connection is still alive because you are still working on it, which means they don't have to. When you stop, when you truly, calmly, and definitively stop over-explaining, you are not introducing an absence. You are introducing a profound and destabilizing presence, the presence of your own reality untethered from theirs. This silence is deafening because it strips away the background noise of your efforts. It removes the emotional soundtrack they used to navigate. Now they are left alone in the quiet with the consequences of their own behavior. The dynamic they engineered, where your action, chasing, provokes their reaction, withdrawing, collapses. The script is gone. The silence becomes a container for all the unacknowledged truths they have been evading. It echoes with the questions they never answered, the needs they pathologize, the love they minimize. It is terrifying because it forces a form of accountability that no argument ever could. An argument is a connection, Weaver toxic. It is a form of engagement. Your calm, reasoned silence is a declaration of emotional independence. It communicates without a single syllable that you have exited the game they designed. The control they exerted by withholding now has no object to act upon. They can deactivate, but they are deactivating against a wall of peaceful resolution, not a storm of desperate protest. This silence is loud because it finally speaks the one truth they are most afraid of. That a person can walk away from their confusion not in anger, but in serene, unshakable recognition that the cost of admission, the cost of their own self-betrayal, is simply too high. It reframes the entire narrative from, "Why won't you love me correctly?" to, "I am no longer financing your avoidance with my dignity." That is a sound that reverberates in the deepest chambers of a psyche built on escape. To interpret an avoidant partner's distance as a simple absence of care is to make a critical diagnostic error. It leads the hurt partner down a rabbit hole of self-doubt, asking, "Do they love me?" When the more accurate and psychologically complex question is, what are they afraid of that love will do? The distance is not passive. It is an active strategic withdrawal. It is a panic room constructed not from stone and steel, but from ambiguity, delayed replies, canceled plans, and emotional neutrality. This room is built because their internal world perceives intensity of feeling, their own and especially by others, as a threat to their very integrity. Often forged in childhood environments where dependence was met with disappointment, rejection, or intrusion, they learned that to need is to be vulnerable to profound hurt. The solution was to systematically disconnect the self from the need. Emotion, particularly soft emotion like longing, sadness, or vulnerable love, is suppressed not because it doesn't exist, but because its existence feels synonymous with danger. This is where the illusion of control is masterfully constructed. In a healthy dynamic, emotional regulation is a collaborative internal process. We feel something, we communicate it, we co-regulate with a partner. In the avoidant dynamic, regulation is outsourced through the mechanism of distance. By stepping back, by creating space, they force you into a state of anxiety or pursuit. Your activated state then becomes the problem they are reacting to. The focus shifts from, I am uncomfortable with my own feelings of closeness, to you are being too needy, clingy, intense. It is a brilliant, if tragic, sleight of hand. They control the level of intimacy by controlling their own availability, and they control the narrative by framing your natural human response to inconsistency as the pathology. Your over-explaining is the gasoline on this fire. Each carefully crafted paragraph, each attempt to logically outline your feelings is met with their internal translation, demand, engulfment, loss of self. Your words are not heard for their content of love or hurt. They are heard as the clanging of the door to their panic room. So they retreat further inside, bolting the door, seeing your continued presence outside as proof the threat is real. The power of this system is its airtight logic within their framework. Your pain is evidence of your dependency, which justifies their need for distance. Their distance creates your pain. It is a perfect self-justifying loop. They feel a momentary sense of safety in their isolation, a relief from the perceived pressure. What they often fail to feel is the profound loneliness that is the collateral damage of this safety. They mistake the numbness of suppression for peace. They confuse the sterility of emotional control for independence. It is a survival strategy that works in the way a lifeboat works. It keeps you afloat in a stormy sea, but it is not a vessel designed for a journey to a rich and welcoming shore. It is designed purely for survival, hunkered down against a world of feeling perceived as a hurricane. When you stop explaining, you stop feeding this loop. You stop playing the role of the problem they are regulating against. You withdraw the fuel of your reaction. Suddenly, the panic room is just a room. The silence outside is not a siege, it is a quiet landscape. And they are left inside, alone with the very feelings they built the room to escape. The loneliness, the emptiness, the flickering, awareness of what their protection has cost. The control they exerted was entirely dependent on your participation in the dance. When you stop dancing, the control becomes a limp, useless pose. The distance is no longer a tool to manage you. It is just the empty space they have chosen, and in that space, the truth of their own emotional starvation becomes unavoidable. There's a crucial, life-altering distinction between abandonment and detachment that lies at the heart of reclaiming your power. Abandonment is an external act of leaving, often charged with punishment, revenge, or a final declaration of worthlessness. It is a dramatic severing. Detachment, in the psychological sense we are discussing, is an internal uncoupling. It is the conscious, gentle process of disentangling your sense of worth, your emotional stability, and your reality from the outcomes of another person's behavior. When you stop chasing an avoidant partner, you are not abandoning them. You are, for the first time, ceasing to abandon yourself. Every moment spent over-explaining, contorting your needs into palatable packages, and pleading for basic recognition is a subtle act of self-abandonment. You are leaving your own emotional ground to stand on the shifting sands of their approval, which is designed to never solidify. This shift into calm detachment is the psychological equivalent of removing the keystone from an arch. The entire dynamic collapses because it was built upon the unspoken assumption of your pursuit. Their internal conflict. The core wound of the avoidant is a tug-of-war between two profound fears. The fear of engulfment. If I get too close, I will be consumed and lose myself. And the fear of abandonment. If I am truly alone, I will not survive. Their entire modus operandi is a delicate, unconscious balancing act meant to keep them suspended between these two terrors. They engage just enough to stave off the specter of abandonment, then distance to neutralize the threat of engulfment. Your consistent chasing was the ballast that kept this unstable vessel somewhat steady. It reassured the part of them terrified of abandonment that you were still there, still hooked, still willing to play. This allowed them to focus almost entirely on managing the fear of engulfment through withdrawal. Your detached silence removes that ballast. Suddenly, the fear of abandonment, usually buried and managed by your behavior, is activated from within them. It is no longer a hypothetical. Your peaceful silence presents a new data point. A person can disengage not in a fiery rage that confirms their neediness, but in a state of quiet, resolved clarity. This is incomprehensible to their framework. It forces the two fears to collide. The part of them that might miss you, that might feel a pang of loss, is suddenly in direct conflict with the part that is terrified of what your return would mean. They are left alone to manage this civil war within their own psyche, a war they have spent a lifetime outsourcing. Do they reach out and risk engulfment? Or do they stay silent and risk a permanent, calm abandonment they themselves have orchestrated? This is the internal conflict they never show. You are no longer the protagonist in their story of avoidance. You have become a silent, neutral witness to the consequences of it. Your detachment does not punish them. It presents them for the first time with the unmediated reality of their own attachment strategy. It is the ultimate mirror, and as anyone with a deep fear of engulfment knows, a mirror feels dangerously like a trap because it shows you what is truly there, not what you have managed to project onto the world. We often misconstrue power in relationships as dominance, as the ability to make the other person hurt, regret, or chase. This is a juvenile and ultimately hollow understanding of power. The authentic, unassailable power shift that happens when you stop over-explaining has nothing to do with them and everything, to do with the fundamental reallocation of your own resources. Imagine your emotional and intellectual energy as capital. In the dynamic with an avoidant, you have been making terrible, bankrupting investments. You invest massive capital, your time, your analytical skill, your empathy, your vulnerability, into a venture with no returns. The venture is called getting them to understand. Each explanation is a capital injection. Each cycle of hope and confusion is a loss. You are depleting your own reserves to prop up a failure. In Enterprise, the moment you stop, you cease all outgoing investments. The capital that was flowing out in a constant, exhausting stream begins to pool within you. It compounds. This is the genesis of real power. The energy you spent deciphering texts is now energy for a hobby. The mental bandwidth you used rehearsing conversations is now bandwidth for strategic thinking about your own life. The emotional strength you expended on tolerating cognitive dissonance is now strength for building healthier connections elsewhere. This internal compounding creates a density, a gravitational pull of self-respect. You are no longer a satellite in their unstable orbit. You are becoming your own center. This shift is felt. It is not announced. It is transmitted through the quiet confidence of your actions, through the unwavering boundaries of your silence, through the simple fact that you are no longer available for the old patterns. This clarity is the dividend of your compounded energy. In the fog of chasing, you could not see the system clearly because you were inside it, desperately trying to fix the gears. From the solid ground of your own dignity, the entire machinery is visible. You see their distance for what it is, a fear response, not a verdict on your worth. You see the mixed signals as the inevitable output of their internal conflict, not a puzzle you are meant to solve. You see the emotional starvation diet not as something you must endure, but as a table you are free to Eve. This clarity is power because it allows for choice informed by reality, not by hope or fear. You are not winning against them. You are winning back your own mind, your own time, your own soul. The power is in the restoration of your own sovereignty. They may sense this shift, the loss of the anxious energy they used to navigate by, the presence of a calm they can no longer influence, and it may provoke a reaction. That reaction is irrelevant. The power is already secured. It is the power of a person who has finally decided that the most important explanation owed is the one they stop giving to themselves, the explanation for why they ever accepted so little, for so long, from someone so capable of offering nothing. The journey does not end with detachment or even with the recognition of your own power. It culminates in a fundamental reconstruction of the self. The goal is not to build a fortress where a heart once was, to become the cold, dismissive mirror of the avoidant. That is merely adopting the opposite dysfunction. The goal is to become solid, to become grounded. Where there was once a reactive chaos, a storm of anxiety, confusion, and desperate explanation, there becomes a capacity for a measured, conscious response. A reaction is involuntary, a nervous system spiked to a stimulus. A response is a choice, made from the stable ground of your values and self-worth. This is the essence of emotional regulation, and it is the ultimate reclamation. This solidity is cultivated in the quiet. In the silence you once rushed to fill with words, pleading for understanding, you now find a space for listening. But you are not listening for their footsteps, for the ping of a notification. You are listening for the sounds of your own being, which were drowned out by the cacophony of the chase. You begin to hear your own instincts again, the ones that said this hurts, that said this is unfair, that you overrode with explanations. You hear your own desires, your own taste, your own opinions, no longer filtered through the lens of will this make them pull away. The silence becomes a sanctuary for self-discovery, not a torture chamber of anticipation. Becoming solid means your emotional state is no longer a derivative of theirs. Their withdrawal does not trigger a collapse, it triggers observation. Their potential return does not trigger elation, it triggers assessment. Your worth is decoupled from their actions. This is not coldness. It is the warmth of self-love radiating inward, creating a core temperature that cannot be lowered by someone else's emotional air conditioning. It is the strength to offer compassion without losing yourself, to offer boundaries without cruelty, to offer love as a choice, not a compulsion. The chaotic energy that once flowed outward in torrents of explanation now circulates within, creating a sense of wholeness and resilience. You are not hard. You are resilient. You are not closed. You are selective. You are not silent because you have nothing to say. You are silent because you have finally learned that not everything you think and feel requires their validation to be real. The final, unforgettable truth is this. In the silence you were taught to fear, you will recover the most important voice you will ever know, your own. And that voice, clear, unedited, and grounded in its own truth, is the only voice that can ever guide you to a love that does not require you to disappear.